21st of January, welcome to Number of the Day. It's much smaller than yesterday, but almost as significant, 3.6% for the inflation, Francis Herd. And before we even get into why this has happened, I need an Econ 101 refresher, if you will. It's breaking news. It's big news. I don't think many people understand why it's so important.
Well, inflation affects us all, because inflation is about the cost of living. So inflation is simply the rate at which prices are rising. And you don't really want prices to go down. That has a whole lot of weird economic effects, and people don't buy things expecting them to go down. But you don't want prices to be shooting up, because then people can't afford this month what they could afford last month, and everything gets more expensive, and we're in crisis. So what you want is a nice, stable, and what we want is around 3%. So this figure is pretty good.
It is pretty good, and we're going to talk about what the Reserve Bank might do with this later in the year. The analogy I always remember you giving me years ago was two. There was two of them, and this is a nice, easy one to follow. Let's imagine in a world there's a loaf of bread that costs 100 Rand. So does that mean from today, the same loaf of bread that I bought last month for Christmas is now 103 Rand and 60 cents, and a movie ticket was 150 Rand, it's now 155 Rand.
Yeah.
It sounds like small increments, which to some people might not seem that important, but for lower income households, if you add all the groceries together, that basket starts getting a little pricey.
Yes, so let's be clear, it's an average, right?
Yes.
So it's not specifically the bread or the movie ticket, but it's nice to look at an individual example. And we are looking retrospectively, so we're talking about December. So maybe your bread will be looking even better today. And food inflation is very important, because poor households spend a larger portion of their income on food. So if you're looking at rich households or middle class, you'll have different drivers. But food inflation is so important for the poor in South Africa.
Basics.
Yeah, so you don't only want to look at inflation, but you want to look at what is going up and what is going down. But if we look at the general picture, Gareth, 3.2% was the average inflation for last year, because we now know what happened last year as a whole. And that is a 21-year low. So that is very good news. And it means that the efforts of the Reserve Bank and everybody involved to bring down the rate of inflation and to control the cost of living crisis is working. So let's welcome that. And generally, it's taking the pressure off people who were really, really struggling.
So what does that mean for SARB later this year? Because we keep hoping, fingers crossed, that there would be interest rate cuts. So this is where you're going to have to just talk to me again about inflation versus interest rate, and what could SARB be doing if you had access to their crystal ball?
So we do have access, because economists are predicting, and the Reserve Bank is going to meet at the end of January. About 1 in 3 right now are saying that there will be another interest rate cut. And remember, we've had inflation coming down, and because inflation is okay, the Reserve Bank has more room to play. Now, this is what happens. If the cost of living is getting out of control, the Reserve Bank wants to raise interest rates. That raises your bond and what you're spending on a car. So it actually punishes you, but it also means you have less money to go and spend on other things, which generally calms down the price increases, because you don't have too many people buying too few things. I hope that sort of explains it, but if inflation is too hot, then the Reserve Bank wants to raise interest rates. If inflation is under control, then the Reserve Bank has room to cut interest rates.
I suppose this is why
That's why we've seen cuts.
And this is why I think it's been referred to before. It's like it's the opening and the closing of the hot water tap, depending which temperature you want to try and manage. You don't want to get too burnt, not too cold.
Yes.
The cost of living piqued my interest because, again, maybe I'm wrong, but you can tell me that when you see interest rate increases or inflation going up, in this case, what isn't going up is wages. That's still the other issue, is people's ability to spend just isn't in line with inflation and interest rates.
And that's why you don't want inflation to be too high, because by the way, your salary only goes up once a year,
Yes.
where goods actually go up in price generally every day, but we record it once a month. So you want some concurrence there. And the problem is if inflation is too hot, then prices, people's salaries aren't keeping up, unless you're a government worker, because those have generally been above inflation, which is one of the problems that the Reserve Bank has spoken about. So that is very interesting. Generally, the Reserve Bank is now targeting 3%. Remember last year, they said 3% was their target, and National Treasury confirmed that. So 3.6% is above that. So you would say, well, why is there an expectation that rates can come down at all? But generally, the Reserve Bank is trying to sort of target ahead where inflation is going, and they are expecting it to come down to 3%. What's really helping is fuel prices. So in December, fuel was actually up compared to the year before, but we know we're now at 4-year lows. So that remains. It's going to be a good picture for this year. And once fuel inflation is down, that means you don't have pressure on the goods being transported by roads to go up. So it's generally a good picture. It's a good picture for last year, and it's a good picture for this year, if the models hold.
If the models hold. I want to talk about another model, if I can, for a moment. We've spoken about, respectfully, basic income households, very important. Food inflation for them. The fuel inflation will impact lower income.
Can I throw in red meat quickly?
And red meat, yes.
Red meat, big problem.
Okay.
Because December, if you were buying steak, I think it was up even more significantly, but overall, meat up 12% in December from December before.
Wow.
Why? Because of foot and mouth. And that we don't have under control
I was
yet.
about to ask you what was pushing this up, and you jumped on the red meat, so that's a big one.
And that is a big one because people want to eat meat.
That's what you braai. You don't braai chicken.
Yeah, what's going to happen to braai day?
No, I'm sorry. I had friends of mine say to me that chicken is a vegetable. I mean, if you're going to braai, then braai red meat, which is why it's so much more expensive now. What else could be pushing it up?
So foot and mouth, I think, is very significant. You have different drivers. I'm not an agricultural expert, but cheese is also going up. So general concern about protein. But eggs are coming down, and at least some vegetables were coming down in December. So it's a mixed picture. But if you love red meat, no, it's not looking good. And hopefully South Africa will get on top of foot and mouth disease, because that is still really ravaging certain provinces, and farmers are euthanizing their cattle, and they're not allowed to transport it and sell it. So they're really being hit hard.
They are being hit hard, but it's not even the local markets. I would imagine we're a big exporter of red meat to other markets. There must be other markets that must be a concern of ours as well. And those markets are watching us and how we react to foot and mouth disease. It's not just about the cost; it's how we're reacting to get on top of this.
Yes, because it's about exports as well.
Yeah.
And last year there was talk about how we should partition the country and be very careful about the transport, because then other countries are more willing to export from parts of South Africa that aren't being ravaged by foot and mouth disease. But generally, we have to get on top of this.
We do. But so we've unpacked why inflation is doing what it's doing. You've unpacked what it could mean for people when it comes to red meat, for example, lower income households. What do we do with this? What advice do you have? Maybe what have you been hearing? Who have you been talking to? What do I do with this as a South African?
So the best advice I've heard is pay off your debt. Because South Africa is an indebted nation. Yeah. Many of us are just living beyond our means. So when the pressure is off, like now, and goods aren't rising at a huge rate and interest rates are lower, so you're also saving, by the way, if you bought a house 2 years ago, massive savings, but don't blow it. Bring down your debt. Unfortunately, because the interest rate is low, because the Reserve Bank hasn't been dealing with high inflation, savers aren't making a huge amount in the bank. So maybe you should be in equities or whatever. That's a whole different discussion. But the best advice I've heard is get on top of your debt. Use this opportunity. With inflation last year at a 21-year low on average. And that was the number of the day. For December, it came in at 3.6%.